Today I wanted to talk about a topic that I really only started paying attention to in the last couple of years. Also, I apologize for the AC in the background. That will quiet down here in a minute. But that being emulation, and more specifically emulation devices. Because there's two kinds of emulation, right? You got the kind of emulation where, say, you're playing Super Mario 3D All-Stars on the Nintendo Switch. Yes, believe it or not, those games are using emulators to achieve playing those games on the Nintendo Switch. And then there's the other obvious emulators like SNES 9X on PC or mobile, for example. But then you have all-out emulation devices. Some that seek to emulate the devices, via software, but then some via hardware, FPGA. Now, before we get into this list, I will say that this list is more geared towards beginners. So, if you're already familiar with the space, you're not going to find any hidden gems here. We're talking about the well-known ones, but, just for anybody that has recently gotten into emulation or is looking to get into it, I have options at all the various price points, really low end and really high end as well. So, you'll have a way to get into it no matter what your budget is looking like, no matter what you have on hand at the moment. And also keep in mind that I won't be able to talk too much about Nintendo or emulating those specific devices just because, well, if you know, you know. So I gotta be a little careful with that, and I'm not really gonna be able to show any gameplay during this video. I sincerely apologize. And I will also mention that I'm only covering devices that I have first-hand knowledge and experience with. So, if there's other devices, again, that should have been on this list, there's a chance I just haven't gotten to use them. First on the list, we have the Retroid Pocket 5. Now, before we get into it, I just wanted to go ahead and run down the specs and the prices and everything. So this one is going to run you about $220, depending on when it's in stock. If it's not, it's going to run you a bit more on a secondhand site. Now, in terms of the specs for the CPU, I'm not sure if this is like proprietary or something. It just says like A77, A77, A55 at like 2.8 gigahertz. So, I don't know, maybe that's decent. For the GPU, we got an Adreno 650. For the RAM, we have 8 gigs of LPDDR4X at 2133 megahertz. For the storage, it comes with 128 gigs, which is, a good bit for an emulation device, but it also does come with expandable storage, as all of these emulation devices do and should. For the OS, it's running Android 13. It has a 5.5-inch AMOLED display, 1080p, 60 FPS. It has a 5,000 hour milliamp battery. It has analog triggers, 3D Hall sticks, Wi-Fi 6, and Bluetooth 5.1 support. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. If I had to just pick one from this list, like not considering price or anything, because when we start to consider price, my actual number one pick will be coming up later. But if price wasn't a concern, this would be my go-to pick, because this plays up to PlayStation 2, GameCube, Dreamcast, that era. And really, there's very few games from that generation that you'll have problems running. And, even if you do run into a bit of a hiccup, you could, just tweak some settings, make it work. You might have to lower a few graphic settings or whatever. But really, that's not really going to be a problem on here. The thumbsticks on the device are really nice. The triggers are really nice. And also, I love the different color varieties. When I put the picture up originally, I'm sure I put up the GameCube color one because that's my absolute favorite looking one. Personally, I went with the black one. That's my choice for this device, but the GameCube one does look really cool. So all in all, if you're willing to shell out a little extra money, sure, this isn't the most budget-friendly option on the list, but it's definitely not as expensive as some of the later entries. So this is definitely a nice middle ground of hey, if you just want to emulate, a bunch of stuff up to the PS2, this system is literally perfect for it. Next up, we have the most expensive option on the list. Now, I'm actually going to have to look up to see what the different price varieties are on this thing, because there's a few different models of this device, and that might have given away what I'm talking about. And yes, this is indeed the Steam Deck or the Steam Deck OLED. You can get this device for as low as, I say as low as, but $399 for the 256 gig LCD version, or $549 for the 512 gigabyte OLED version, or the 1 terabyte OLED version for $649. Keep in mind, this is all in USD, so it may vary depending on your region. Like if you're in Europe, for example, it's going to be even more expensive, unfortunately. That being said, once we start to run through the specs and once I tell you what this thing can emulate, it's definitely worth it. So it's got an APU inside of it, which if you don't know what an APU is, it's essentially a CPU and a GPU in one. So the CPU is a Zen 2, just go off on all that. Don't worry about that. Just know it's a pretty good APU. In terms of the RAM, we got 16 gigs of LPDDR5 onboard RAM. The storage is obviously scalable, as we mentioned before, but you can also upgrade the storage later on. You can open it up and install your own extra SSD, and it does also have support for SD cards. The display is 1280 by 800, which is a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, which might be a little bit of a turnoff for some people, just because it's okay, that's kind of quirky. You could have just went for 16 by 9, but it's all right. And then besides all that, Bluetooth 5.3 support, Wi-Fi 6E support, 50 watt-hour batteries, so it says 3 to 12 hours of gameplay roughly. And it also, another really cool thing about the Steam Deck is that you can switchify this thing. If you buy a dock, there is some third-party ones, but I would always be careful with that, just because, if you know anything about buying like third-party docks for the Nintendo Switch, for example, you don't want to fry your Steam Deck, so I'd probably just go with an official one, because official ones do exist, but you can dock it and then, you know, have it go into your TV via HDMI. And then when you keep in mind that this thing also has Bluetooth support, you know, you can just hook up like a DualSense or a DualShock or an Xbox controller to it, and then there you go. You have like a console and a handheld all in one, and you have your Steam library there, because if you're anything like me, then you probably have hundreds of Steam games that you have no idea what to do with, because you just went crazy on the sales. Now, even though the Steam Deck is a bit more expensive, it can emulate up to PS3, 360. It's not going to run every single game flawlessly, but it can do a few games, and a certain other recent portable console, not the most recent one, but the one from 2017. I'm not going to say the name outright for legal reasons. I could be talking about any handheld device. What are you talking about? But if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. And again, I kind of have to dance around what I say here, but it is capable of doing some of that. Just keep in mind that, again, you are going to be spending a pretty penny and upwards of maybe a few pretty pennies if you go for the 1TB OLED. Next up, I wanted to talk about one that, does this count as an emulator? It kind of counts as an emulator because it's FPGA, that being the Analog Pocket. Now, do keep in mind there's been stock troubles for the entirety of this device's existence. So whether you can or can't get one is just kind of sort of depend. But basically, what this device seeks to do is not just emulate, but replicate the experience you would have had on a Game Boy back in the day, for example. So I have the list right here. It says that it supports Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance game cartridges. But one cool thing worth noting is that if you get a cartridge adapter, you can also run Neo Geo Pocket, TurboGrafx 16, Atari Lynx, and more. The screen is absolutely beautiful. It says 1600 by 1440 resolution, which, yeah, after looking at this thing, that adds up. It's a very sharp display. It has exactly 10 times the pixels of the original Game Boy, and an actual backlight, unlike the original Game Boy. And yeah, obviously, since this thing is FPGA, honestly, compared to many other devices that you're gonna get, this is the closest, if not basically exactly what it would have been like playing on a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance. Now, granted, software emulation for those devices is, it's been good for a long time. It's not exactly hard to emulate a Game Boy. That being said, there is always still the slightest difference in the world between software emulation and playing on the real thing, and this is basically as good as it's gonna get. As mentioned before, though, the price and whatnot is gonna vary as to, like, if it's in stock. Like, oh man, I'm looking on Amazon right now, like $340. For some reason, it's $400 on eBay and Poshmark and whatnot. It's not supposed to be that expensive. Yeah, looking at the official site right now it's going for about $220. Let's see, is it in stock? Yeah, it's in stock. I just added it to my cart. So yeah, if you're watching this right now, if you want to go pick one up, it's definitely worth it at the price of $220, but do not get scammed on eBay. Next up, I want to talk about one that might count as a cheat, but it's like really honest, okay? Your smartphone. I know that might sound like a cop-out answer, but seriously, if you have like an Android or even an iPhone now, because iPhones have started to allow emulation, honestly, everybody already has a smartphone, and if you have a smartphone, it doesn't matter how good or bad it is. Like, you're going to be able to do some emulation. There's not a single smartphone that exists that can't emulate some NES, some Game Boy, some Super Nintendo. And, you might be wondering, like, oh, but you have to use the buttons on the screen. Well, no, you don't. Give me a minute. I bought this controller thing for like $10, $15 on AliExpress, and it works beautifully. You can like stretch it out, put your phone inside of it. It's got Bluetooth. You can use it wired if you want. The thumbsticks are amazing on this thing. The buttons are fantastic. It even like lights up and everything. I don't think there's, oh, never mind, there is a charge on this thing. Like, look at that, it lights up if you wanted to. You can also turn off the lights if you wanted to, so then it just, doesn't do that. The triggers are really nice, and like I said, this thing only costed me like 10, 15 bucks on AliExpress. I'm not affiliated or sponsored in any way. I'm just saying, like, I got a great deal on this thing. It's called the D3 controller, I believe. At least that's what it's called every time that I try to pair it to my device. So honestly, if you're looking to get into emulation on a budget, this is the best way to do it. Just buy a controller for your phone, hook it up via Bluetooth or wired if you want, and then that's it. You're off to the races. And like my phone, for example, it is a cruddy Android. Like, my phone is bottom of the barrel. In fact, I'm finally getting a new phone today. I just bought an iPhone 12 the other day because I figured, like, dude, I've been using, excuse my language, I've been using shitty phones for like the last 5 years now. The last good phone I had was an iPhone 6S, and I used that thing until like 2021. And then I got a crappy Android. The screen fell off of it after like a year or two. Like, I kid you not, the whole screen just became detached. That sucked. And then I've been using this crappy phone with a crappy camera for a while, so I decided it's time to reward myself, which means this will also be the last video you guys see of me with this crappy camera, and by the time you guys see me again, I'll have a camera that's actually worth a dang. But even my crappy Android, you want to know something? It can play that one console from 2017 that we won't name. It can play PlayStation 2. It can play GameCube for much cheaper than any of these devices ever could. So your phone can do more than you think, probably. And finally, we have my absolute favorite top pick, go-to emulator choice anytime that I'm talking to somebody about emulators, that being the RG35XX Plus. Man, this thing has been the GOAT in the emulation scene in terms of getting a great device on a budget that is a fantastic quality. Now, there is two versions. You have the Anbernic RG35XX, which is a great option, but the one I prefer is the Plus, just because then you can play some PSP, you can play some Dreamcast, and of course, between the XX and the Plus, you can consoleize both of them, which I always do. You know, I plug it. I have it on hand right here. It's literally just sitting on my desk. That's how you know I love this thing. It was literally just sitting on my desk. And I went with this color scheme as well because it's very reminiscent of the OG Game Boy. Love nostalgia. Anyway, yeah, you can literally consoleize it and plug it into your TV, hook up like a DualShock to it or, you know, whatever, and you can play PS1 games that way. So you basically just have like a PS1 in Switch form if you get this. There's also the RG35XXH, and I believe there's like another device that runs on the same chipset. If you get the XX, it's only going to cost you $30, and with that, you get up to PS1. You get, obviously, all of like the 16 and 8-bit consoles, and I mean, that in itself, man, being off to the races with PS1 games for $30, that's insane. But then if you go for the Plus, which guess what? It's only $10 more. Actually, on their site right now, it's only $9 more. That gives you access to PSP and Dreamcast. Is it going to run those games flawlessly? Absolutely not. There's going to be plenty of PSP games that don't even run. But for the most part, most Dreamcast games are going to run just fine from my experience. I have a good deal of Dreamcast games on mine, and none of them have any issues. PSP, again, it's going to depend. You might need to tweak some graphic settings, but still the fact that it's running PSP at all for $40, absolutely insane. When it comes to the PS1, on the RG35XX Plus, you can actually then use super resolution to get double the pixels on the screen, so it's, you know, that much sharper. Me personally, I stick with the original resolution just because I like the OG intended look of PS1 games. I don't really like upscaling games if I can help it, but if you want to do that, you can do that for $9 more. Obviously, at that point, you also have access to like N64, and you know, there's so many things that the RG35XX Plus can do, and at such a cheap price point of $42, it's like right now it's on sale, $42.45, and it's constantly on sale on their official site, on AliExpress. I bought mine from AliExpress from their official store. Make sure you buy it from an official store so you don't get scammed, but it's like, why wouldn't you buy that? And I mean, even if you're on a bit more of a tighter budget, $33 still, like, of course that's worth it. But anyways, there it is. I don't want to keep you guys here for too long. That is my pick for the top 5 emulation devices here in 2025. I know one of them, you know, the smartphone thing was kind of a cop-out, but I mean, it's true. Well, a lot of people overlook that, but it is really easy to get into emulation that way. But now I'd love to hear from you guys. Is there any devices that I possibly overlooked or should take a look at? Because honestly, I've been out of the loop on some of the new emulation devices coming out for a little bit now. These are just the ones where I was looking at them. I was like, hey, I have firsthand knowledge and experience with these. These are really good, and even here in 2025, I feel like they're still the best bang for buck. But hey, if there's some other ones I should check out, definitely let me know and I'll give them a look. But anyway, as always, a massive shout out to all the patrons and channel members. Thank you to all you in the low ballot tier, and an even bigger shout out to the big ball tier, my last king and Big Daddy Manny, and the biggest shout out to DJ Ranamus and Cheese Girl. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.